how can you be the person who still shows up? Still performs flawlessly, checks off every single task on your list, but you feel utterly exhausted. And I don't just mean physically tired. I mean fundamentally sort of broken and empty inside.
That paradox right there.
Yeah.
That is the absolute heart of what we're talking about today. It's called functional burnout.
Functional burnout.
And in the context of the sources you've shared, which are really fascinating, they range from clinical neurobiology to therapy models. Burnout is this state of severe emotional, physical, and cognitive weariness.
It sounds all-encompassing.
It is. And the key thing, the thing to really grasp, is that it's caused by prolonged, uncontrolled stress. It's not just about one bad week. It develops progressively, sometimes over years, until it becomes this chronic state of depletion.
And I think for the kind of person we're talking about, it often gets misdiagnosed, right? It's just, oh, you just need a good long vacation. Or even worse, that it's some kind of character flaw. Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got a really solid stack of sources here. I mean, we're looking at neurophysiology studies mapping actual brain changes, therapeutic frameworks like acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and even some high-performance coaching philosophies that touch on identity and value alignment.
Really comprehensive view.
Yeah. So our mission in this deep dive is to look at all of that, at the psychological and the neurological evidence, to understand exactly why this silent survival happens, why standard rest just doesn't seem to work, and what the true path to recovery and redesign looks like.
And before we get into all of that, just a vital note for you, the listener. We're providing general education and context around stress and depletion here.
Right.
The experience of burnout is profound, but this discussion, it's not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're experiencing severe or persistent symptoms, please consult a qualified healthcare professional. We're here to offer clarity, not a cure. #take section 1, what functional burnout really looks like.
It's the illusion of being fine, isn't it? I mean, you've built this elaborate system, a high-output, high-performance machine that just keeps delivering.
On deadlines, on presentations, on family obligations.
Exactly. The system looks flawless from the outside.
Yeah.
But that internal compass, that spark, that source of motivation, it's just completely faded. You're hitting the goals, but you're not feeling any of the meaning.
That is the classic profile. Functional burnout is really the high-achieving subtype of this whole phenomenon. It's defined by this toxic collision.
A collision of what?
Of internal pressures, things like intense perfectionism, the crippling fear of letting people down, this profound sense of over-responsibility.
For things that aren't even yours to control.
Precisely. And that all collides with the external pressures, unrealistic workloads, maybe poor managerial support, or just environments that normalize chronic urgency.
So, the sources often define burnout using those three pillars: exhaustion, cynicism or detachment, and reduced accomplishment. But that last one, the reduced accomplishment, that's the confusing part for this profile, right? Because the output is still high.
It is so confusing because the reduced accomplishment isn't something you'd see on a quarterly report. It's internal. It's about efficacy.
Efficacy. So my belief in my own ability to get things done.
Exactly. You might still deliver the project, but the internal operating cost, the immense effort it requires, has become catastrophic.
Yeah.
The exhaustion is mostly emotional and mental. It's a fatigue in your soul, not in your muscles.
And the cynicism.
That cynicism, it shows up as detachment. And that detachment is actually a survival strategy.
How so?
Well, if you distance yourself from the work, or from the people, or from the outcome, it just hurts less. It hurts less when the impossible standards aren't met, or when all that effort just feels totally meaningless.
So the external performance we see, the person answering emails perfectly, delivering that keynote, it's actually just this detailed, exhausting choreography.
It is. It's a mechanism specifically designed to hide that dull, deep internal ache. And the cost of maintaining that choreography is what actually consumes most of the energy.
It's the performance of being okay that's so draining.
Absolutely. And the internal dialogue here is key. Perfectionism. It isn't really about having high standards. It's usually fear dressed up as excellence. You're constantly trying to preemptively fix every possible point of failure or criticism before it even happens.
Like taking on one more project or scheduling that extra meeting just to smooth things over.
Yes, or absorbing the emotional mess from a colleague because you think only you can fix it.
You're essentially measuring your self-worth by how little friction the organization or the family experiences, all because of your heroic, self-sacrificing efforts. It sounds noble, but...
It's self-destructive.
Yeah.
And here's the paradox. You're getting external praise for this behavior, which temporarily feels good. It satisfies that need for safety.
But at the same time,
You're losing your internal self-worth. Because all that intense effort, it's no longer converting into genuine meaning or satisfaction for you. The fuel's expensive, the machine runs perfectly, but the operator inside is just collapsing.
which is why so many high achievers resist help. They believe if they remove just one piece of that carefully constructed choreography,
The whole thing will collapse. Their work, their reputation, everything. They don't see the structure as the problem. They see themselves as the flawed engine inside of it, and they think the only solution is more willpower.
which brings us to a really core idea here, something vital for anyone listening to internalize.
Yes.
Burnout isn't always collapse. Sometimes it's silent survival.
It's the person answering emails at midnight and still making breakfast at 6 a.m., but feeling completely hollow while doing it.
Which raises our first debate question for you to reflect on. How can someone be exhausted if they're still functioning? Hashtag section 2. Why rest doesn't touch this kind of exhaustion. We hear this complaint constantly. You prioritize sleep, you manage to get 8 solid hours, the weekend finally comes, you relax, you binge a show, maybe even turn off your notifications.
They do all the right things.
All the right things, and yet you wake up Monday morning feeling just as heavy, just as drained, just as anxious as you did on Friday afternoon. So, why is rest failing me?
Well, the failure isn't really in the rest itself. It's in misdiagnosing the nature of the exhaustion.
Okay.
Rest helps physical tiredness. Muscle aches, the fatigue from a long run. But burnout exhaustion is rooted much, much deeper. It's in what we call nervous system depletion and dysregulation.
So it's a system failure, not a battery failure.
That's the perfect way to put it. You can recharge a battery, but you can't fix a systemic short circuit just by plugging it in for the weekend.
And when we say system, we're talking about the body's unconscious alarm system, the autonomic nervous system.
Precisely. The NS. It has 2 major branches. You've got the sympathetic nervous system, your fight, flight, or freeze response. That's your accelerator.
Essential for dealing with real danger.
Absolutely. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. That's your brake. Now, when you're under the kind of chronic, prolonged stress that defines functional burnout, your sympathetic system gets stuck in overdrive. It's just running a continuous background scan for threats.
So even if I'm lying on the sofa, even if the house is quiet, my internal alarm is still ringing. Maybe quietly, but persistently.
That's it, exactly. Your body and mind are locked in a state of high alert, and the sources are so clear on this. If you have insufficient recovery time, the level of your stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, it stays elevated even when you're trying to rest.
They're supposed to drop back down, right?
They're supposed to spike when you need them, and then drop back to a healthy baseline. But in burnout, that baseline never fully drops. Your body literally forgets how to shift out of activation mode because it believes on a very deep level that safety depends on continuous vigilance.
This explains the holiday trap. The high achiever book's a week away. And for the first couple of days, maybe there's a little dip in the noise, the immediate pressures are gone. But the underlying neurological programming, that hypervigilance, is still running in the background.
Exactly. And within 48 hours of returning home, or sometimes just thinking about the mountain of emails waiting for you,
The fog is back, the tension, the impatience, it all just rushes back in.
because the problem was never the absence of a vacation. It was the presence of a life structure that reloads the same high-stress state immediately, combined with a nervous system that has lost its internal off switch. You just temporarily removed the inputs. You didn't fix the regulation problem.
So that feeling, that pervasive sense of not being able to feel rested, even after a full night's sleep, that's not laziness. It's a failure of the body's regulatory mechanism.
It is. The body is always ready to jump back into the fray. Which really brings us to the core line for this section. It's so important to understand the structural nature of this.
And that is
Burnout is system failure disguised as achievement,
a very expensive disguise.
which is why we have to shift the conversation away from just seeking more rest and towards seeking better regulation.
Which leads us to our next point of reflection for you. Why does rest fail when the system is already overloaded? Hashtag section 3, the difference between tired and depleted. I used to think the answer was just more coffee, more energy drinks. But at some point, it stopped being about low energy. It started to feel like the fundamental ability to generate engagement, to feel a positive connection to anything, was just gone.
That feeling right there, that inability to generate engagement, that is the key distinction. We need to draw a very sharp line here.
Between tired and depleted.
Exactly. Tiredness generally is a simple energy deficit. It reduces your output, and it's solvable with sleep and food. Depletion, which is central to burnout, it's far more insidious.
How so?
It's the erosion of a positive psychological state. It's the loss of your capacity for self-control and consistent judgment.
That's what psychologists call ego depletion, right? The idea that willpower is a finite resource.
Exactly. The concept of ego depletion suggests that self-control, focus, the ability to resist impulses and make hard decisions. It's a limited, though trainable, resource. When you are functionally depleted, you're constantly drawing on this resource just to maintain basic function, just to keep your composure.
And to suppress all those turbulent emotions we're going to talk about later.
Yes, so if you're a parent trying to balance work, childcare, and household admin, you're just constantly draining that willpower reservoir with no time for replenishment.
And that leads to that emotional exhaustion.
Profound emotional exhaustion. And a reduced sense of efficacy. The belief in your ability to get results. So burnout doesn't just erase your output. It erases your meaning and your capacity. You might be physically at your desk, but your ability to concentrate is severely compromised.
The sources really highlight the reality of decision fatigue here. I think it's a huge cost for high-achieving people. They're constantly switching contexts.
Jumping between emails, strategic thinking, managing teams, personal demands.
And every one of those switches has a cost.
A significant switching cost. It might feel productive in the moment, like you're a master juggler. But each switch leaves behind this little residue of fatigue. By the end of the day, that residue impairs your executive functioning. You see poor attention control, difficulty concentrating.
And you make worse decisions.
You make crude defensive choices.
Yeah.
Because your mental margin is zero. You choose the path of least resistance, not the best path.
That's such a critical point. The high achiever's life, with all its meetings and constant toggling, is actually accelerating their cognitive decay. You're confusing being busy with being effective.
You're shifting your focus from deep, meaningful execution to just frantic firefighting.
Yeah.
You don't need more energy. You need a system that isn't constantly leaking it through unnecessary switches and continuous self-policing.
The key phrase here really summarizes this perfectly.
It does. Burnout is not low energy, it's low capacity.
And capacity has to be restored, not just rested, before anything else can be rebuilt.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to this debate question. Can motivation return without restoring capacity? Hashtag Section 4 chronic stress trains the body to stay on.
So we've established that the nervous system gets stuck.
Yeah?
But it sounds like it's more than that. It sounds like my body isn't just reacting to today's stress. It's like it's been deeply conditioned. It's living in the past, reacting to threats that aren't even here right now. That is precisely the essence of how chronic stress works. It becomes a deeply learned state. It's a maladaptive response. When stress is sustained, not acute, but just continuous, low grade, day after day, it triggers the HPA axis.
The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, okay, that's the body's main internal stress pathway. Can you walk us through what happens when that axis is just on all the time?
Well, when the HPA axis is chronically activated, it floods your system with stress hormones, mainly cortisol. And over time, this sustained elevation, it disrupts your natural rhythm.
The rhythm where cortisol is high in the morning and low at night.
Yes, that healthy diurnal rhythm. In burnout, that rhythm flattens out. It just stays high, which leads to chronic physiological stress. It raises inflammation markers throughout the body. It reduces something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essential for the health of your nerve cells.
And the sources say this constant chemical bath leads to actual physical, structural changes in the brain. This isn't just in your head.
Absolutely not. The neurological impact is profound and it is structural. We see reduced gray matter volume in areas that are critical for regulation and judgment, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
The PFC, that's our executive functioning center, right?
Yeah.
The brake on our emotional system.
It is. And at the same time, we can see an increase in the structural volume and the sensitivity of the amygdala.
The brain's fear and threat center.
That's the one.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying I have a physically smaller capacity for conscious judgment and regulation?
A depleted PFC.
And a hair trigger for fear, anxiety, and threat detection.
An enlarged hypersensitive amygdala. Yes. It is a literal neurological setup for being constantly alert, irritable, and completely unable to switch off.
That makes so much sense. Your brain becomes wired to see threats everywhere, which explains why relaxation can feel so dangerous.
When the amygdala is running the show, stillness feels like vulnerability. High achievers often report feeling guilty or anxious when they're resting, and this is the neurological reason. The nervous system is primed for threat, not safety.
This explains the irritation signal. That first subtle sign that my internal buffer is gone is often just pure irritation.
Yes. When your PFC is depleted, your internal tolerance margin vanishes. Irritation becomes your default response to interruptions, to new ideas, to anything that requires more input. It's your tired brain trying to protect its depleted cognitive margin.
So it looks like strategic efficiency, like you're making quick decisions.
But it's actually a profound loss of curiosity, of patience, of empathy. Curiosity is often the very first quality to vanish when the system is overloaded.
And because that pattern is reinforced every time you successfully dismiss a perceived threat, the state of vigilance just gets deeper and deeper.
It becomes an ingrained habit.
So the core line here, then, is that burnout becomes a learned state, a maladaptive response to chronic stressors.
A habit the body learned to survive in an unsustainable environment.
And that leads us to this question. Is burnout a habit the body learned to survive? Hashtag section 5. Why productivity culture makes burnout worse. It seems like we can't talk about this structural depletion without talking about the environment that feeds it. I mean, it feels like the entire world, work, social media, even friends, just rewards and validates this always-on mentality.
This is the critical intersection.
Yeah.
This is where the individual biological experience slams right into a toxic cultural design.
Yeah.
Productivity culture defines self-worth almost entirely by visible output,
Yeah.
by velocity. Busyness is performed, it's photographed, it's held up as a virtue. If you are not busy, you feel irrelevant.
And this search for external validation creates this huge internal conflict. Because achievement and even visible struggle are seen as the only form of safety, the only armor.
And if achievement is your armor against the anxiety of not being enough, then rest feels not just undeserved, but genuinely risky. If you stop, the armor falls off and you're exposed.
To your own self-criticism or to social judgment?
Exactly. When your identity is fused with your performance, you will always choose more. Even when that more is actively cannibalizing your health and the quality of the very work you care about, you consume your own energy faster than you can replenish it.
You hear it in the language people use, the cult of busyness. Everyone has a crazy week, everyone is flat out, everyone is in back-to-backs.
It normalizes and even sanctifies exhaustion. And on top of that, there's the emotional labor required to maintain a calm and professional front. That's a job in itself, and it spends cognitive energy just as surely as a sprint spends oxygen.
That emotional labor is significant.
And this culture is also fueled by constant optionality. Too many choices, too many inputs, which paradoxically degrades our satisfaction and increases our anxiety. You increase the menu of potential commitments, and you increase the doubt that you picked the right one.
Which then fuels the compulsion to add even more commitments to escape that feeling of doubt.
You accelerate motion without meaning. You mistake velocity for clarity.
So burnout isn't just fueled by the workload itself, it's the cultural expectation that we must never start performing to prove our relevance.
And when organizations reward that visible strain, that heroic last-minute save, they create a demand for drama, not for sustainable stamina. If we really want to dismantle the drivers of burnout, we have to collectively dismantle the prestige around depletion. It has to become uncool.
The key phrase here just summarizes this cultural trap so perfectly.
It does. Burnout thrives where self-worth depends on performance.
The accountability has to be shared.
Between the individual and the cultural environment, absolutely.
So this brings us to a big debate question. Is burnout an individual failure or a cultural one? Hashtag section 6, the role of emotional suppression. Okay, we've talked a lot about the structural issues, the external pressures, but let's look inward for a minute. I know intellectually that I'm avoiding dealing with difficult feelings. You know, anxiety about finances or shame about a project or just loneliness. But confronting them feels too messy, too painful. So my mind rationalizes it. It says, you know, this emotional avoidance is actually saving me energy. It's letting me focus only on the doable tasks.
That rationalization, that is perhaps the most energy-draining part of functional burnout. Emotional repression, the constant attempt to inhibit or suppress negative emotions. It provides instant temporary relief, but it creates a staggering long-term psychological cost.
So the energy I think I'm saving
is actually being spent on concealment. Every time you push a feeling down or try to logic your way out of anxiety, you are spending cognitive capital that should be available for complex thought, for creativity, for just living.
It's pure ego depletion.
It is. You are constantly drawing on your limited self-control resources for emotional performance. just to maintain the facade that everything is fine. The relentless focus on doing, on toxic productivity, it's fundamentally an avoidance mechanism.
We see it in the language, right? Minimizing feelings with, it's not a big deal, or just using work to steer clear of personal issues.
Exactly. And this is where the unseen labor just leaks out. Because unprocessed emotion doesn't vanish. It manifests as a tax, a physiological and relational tax.
How does it leak out?
In ways that negatively affect your relationships.
Yeah.
Sarcasm, impatience, sudden irritability. And it impacts your physical health, your sleep, your appetite. When you trade that adaptive freedom, the ability to feel and respond appropriately for temporary certainty through control, you create distance from yourself. And that distance drains the system.
It makes your inner life sterile. It costs you empathy, intuition. You're too busy managing your own internal state to notice anyone else's.
And we have to acknowledge the immense weight of that unseen labor. It's often far heavier than the labor of the job itself.
The core idea here is so simple, but so profoundly important.
It is.
Unfelt emotions drain the system.
You cannot strategically manage what you are unwilling to courageously feel.
Which makes us wonder, is emotional avoidance more exhausting than work itself? #tag section 7, what actually heals burnout? Not just rest.
Okay, so if the root problem is systemic, this depletion of capacity, compounded by culture and emotional avoidance, then the solution has to be systemic too. It has to be a fundamental redesign. What does real deep-level repair actually look like?
Real recovery is a comprehensive redesign of your entire operating model, and it has to start with actively retraining your body and your nervous system.
You can't just think your way out of it.
You cannot think your way out of a nervous system problem. Recovery has to be present. It has to focus on physiological regulation first, and then bring in the cognitive and behavioral changes.
So we're essentially teaching the body at a cellular level that it's genuinely safe to turn off the alarm again.
Yeah.
What are the key components of this redesign?
I think they fall into 3 categories that have to be addressed together, but starting with the body.
First, nervous system regulation, daily. This means consistent, repeatable practices that help you metabolize stress hormones and restore that balance in your ANS. These are not heroic, one-off attempts at meditation.
They're reliable inputs.
Yes. The sources strongly recommend daily activities like mindfulness, deep diaphragmatic breathing, especially with long exhalations, and very importantly, rhythmic movement.
Walking, cycling, yoga. Why is rhythmic movement so effective?
Because rhythm is predictable. Your nervous system, which is stuck in this chaotic high alert mode, responds beautifully to predictable, non-threatening input. Rhythmic movement sends predictable feedback to the brain, signaling that the body is safe. It's not being pursued by a threat. This helps reset the whole HPA axis.
So small, consistent acts of self-stewardship that build safety over time.
Precisely. Second, reducing internal pressure. This involves using cognitive approaches like strategies from ACT and CBT to challenge and create distance from those limiting thought patterns that fuel self-judgment and perfectionism.
You mentioned ACT before. How does that work here?
ACT focuses on increasing psychological flexibility. So it's not about eliminating difficult thoughts like I'm a failure. It's about changing your relationship to those thoughts. You learn to observe it as just a piece of mental chatter, an old survival story.
And that frees up cognitive space.
It does, so you can set doable, kind actions rooted in your values, rather than impossible demands rooted in fear.
And the third component, that has to address the self-worth issue.
Yes. Third is creating psychological safety and value alignment. You have to actively define your worth, independent of external validation. You stop looking to achievement to define who you are, and instead you use achievement to express who you already are.
That's a fundamental pivot, from proving to expressing.
And when your actions align with your personal values, creativity, community, integrity, whatever they are, you restore purpose. Effort becomes contribution, not performance for approval.
That's the structural shift that allows you to finally release that exhausting need for control. Your identity becomes anchored internally.
You become intrinsically safe.
So the key line that anchors this whole systemic approach is this: burnout heals when the body learns it's no longer under threat.
Safety, not silence, is the antidote.
Which raises our next point for reflection. Should burnout recovery start with the body or the mind? #tag section 8, boundaries that restore energy. Conceptually, boundaries make perfect sense, I get it, but when the pressure is high, when the emails are piling up, or a demanding client is on the line, they feel like a luxury. They're the first thing to go. So how do I make them stick?
We need to fundamentally change the metaphor. We have to stop framing boundaries as defense, as something you reluctantly put up to stop bad things from happening.
Which takes so much willpower.
Exactly. Instead, frame them as design and resource protection. Boundaries are the necessary structure that protects your cognitive bandwidth and preserves your freedom. An engineer designs tolerances into a system. You design non-negotiable limits into your life.
So I should treat my recovery and my mental capacity like a sacred business asset, like P&L protection.
Exactly. If you wouldn't run a business without tracking cash flow and margins, you cannot run your nervous system without tracking load and release. Recovery behaviors and the time for regulation must be scheduled assets, not leftovers.
Energy returns where these constraints exist.
Precisely.
So what are some tangible, practical boundary actions that someone dealing with this who feels they can't afford to slow down can actually implement?
The sources offer a few practical angles. First, saying no with consistency. The immediate jump to a massive no is too hard. So you start small, rehearse small no's to minor requests.
Just to get comfortable with the discomfort.
Yes, the slight discomfort of disappointing someone in a small way is far preferable to collapsing entirely later. Practice the language. I'm not able to take that on this quarter.
Building that muscle gradually. What about our internal standards?
Second, lowering unrealistic standards. Perfectionism is a fear-driven mindset. It guarantees depletion, so you need to simplify. Aim for a B- performance on low-stakes tasks, and aim for 25% less than you originally intended on the high-stakes stuff. If you planned 8 crucial items for the day, only commit fully to 6. That creates breathing room.
That cognitive margin you mentioned.
Exactly. And finally, third, protecting mental space and time equity. This means setting and defending sustainable start and stop times, non-negotiable, and ruthlessly gating your calendar to ensure time for deep work, for thinking, and for true rest.
Treating that time like equity that compounds.
Because it is. It's the only time that generates long-term value. You have to eliminate low-value commitments that exist purely for visibility.
So if recovery is built on rules, on structures that don't care about my mood or my guilt, they're more likely to hold up than willpower alone.
They create stability. And they reduce the amount of daily negotiation your depleted brain has to handle.
So the key phrase here, it summarizes the impact of this redesign. Energy returns where boundaries exist. Constraints breed clarity.
Our next question for reflection then. Why do boundaries feel dangerous during burnout? Hashtag section none. Why doing less can feel worse at first? This is a point that so many high achievers struggle with, and it's deeply relatable. When I finally follow the advice, when I sit still, when I take a moment off the treadmill, the quiet is deafening. I feel this weird sadness or this deep restlessness or even a sudden spike of anxiety that makes me want to start rushing again. The peace feels worse than the chaos.
This phenomenon is a crucial pivot point in recovery. It's why so many people quit resting after 24 hours. When you are a functional person, busyness acts as powerful emotional armor.
Armor against what?
Against self-doubt, anxiety, repressed shame, existential fears. The constant motion is a sophisticated, highly rewarded defense mechanism. When you intentionally stop, all the anxiety and the repressed feelings that avoidance kept hidden, they come rushing to the surface. Stillness mirrors the truth of your internal depletion.
So the exhaustion I was feeling was partly physiological, but the desperate need to keep running, that was emotional. It was a fear of what I would find when I stopped.
That's the exact psychological architecture. Rest, in this sense, is exposing, it's confronting. It triggers the primal fear that everything will collapse if you lose control. If your identity is fused with your output, stopping causes a deep crisis of self-worth. You are forced to confront the sadness, the grief, the anxiety that's underneath the performance.
This sounds like the post-victory void that traps so many people. You know, you win the big client, you finish the huge project, and instead of joy, there's just an emptiness. A silent, deafening space.
And that silence immediately triggers fresh ambition, a renewed need for motion to avoid the emptiness, which just continues the cycle. You suddenly realize you've been using motion without meaning, and that recognition can feel like a devastating loss.
So recovery requires processing that grief.
Grief for the time lost, the energy spent, the self that you suppressed. And that processing is messy work. It takes patience and self-compassion. You have to learn to tolerate the discomfort of stillness, knowing that anxiety is a wave that will eventually break.
So the body's reaction to stillness is a signal that avoidance has been running the show.
It is. The goal isn't to instantly feel calm. The goal is to tolerate the mess that surfaces when you stop moving.
The insight here is crystal clear. Burnout hides pain by keeping you busy.
The treadmill provides both momentum and anesthesia. all in one package.
So we ask you, is busyness a coping mechanism? Okay, so if we accept that functional burnout is a design flaw, a system problem, and not a moral one, how do we fundamentally change the strategy? How do we get from constant accelerating effort to sustainable endurance? What's the core mental shift?
The turning point involves upgrading ambition from compulsion to consciousness. It's the evolution from survival mode, where every action is driven by fear, to intentional mastery and alignment, where action is driven by purpose.
So moving from heroic effort and brute force to disciplined pacing.
Exactly. You stop looking to achievement to define who you are, and instead you use achievement to express who you already are. That decoupling of identity from performance is everything.
This means being really surgical about what stays and what goes. It sounds like intentional subtraction, not adding more productivity hacks.
Intentional subtraction is key, and it takes courage. You have to remove low-value commitments, prune standing meetings that serve no function, and ruthlessly clarify your priorities based on your core values. The goal isn't to quit your life. It's to restore the essential operating capacity of the human behind the machine.
And that requires retiring the activities that exist solely to protect my brand, or maintain the image of busyness, or placate my fear of being irrelevant.
Those are the hardest ones to cut because they're tied to fear. But that is the core of the redesign. You have to choose work that genuinely matters and strengthens you, not impressive work that simply empties you. You need to build a structure that provides safety, permission to rest, and disciplined pacing.
A structure that holds up even when you're tired or anxious.
That's what breaks the cycle.
This entire deep dive has been about that difference, the difference between physical rest and a systemic redesign.
It has. The shift happens when you recognize that the pressure is structural and you learn to negotiate with your nervous system.
Let's anchor this entire discussion with two powerful closing statements. The first one defines the necessary break.
Yes.
Burnout recovery begins when survival mode ends.
And the second one provides that crucial permission to step off the treadmill. You don't need more discipline, you need safety, permission, and pacing.
That brings us to our final question for reflection. What would change if rest didn't need to be earned? Hashtag outro. We've established that functional burnout is a systems issue. It is not a character flaw. The core exhaustion isn't just physical tiredness, it's nervous system depletion and the immense cognitive cost of emotional suppression. The path out is a gentle yet firm redesign of your operating model, starting now.
That's right. The goal is to rebuild capacity and teach your body that it is safe again to downshift. And you can start this journey today in a small way by integrating what we call the 3-minute reset routine. It's a sequence designed to interrupt that sympathetic overdrive without requiring you to stop your entire day.
Let's give the listener 3 concrete actionable steps they can try today.
First, practice the sensory pause. Use external signals, the phone ringing, a traffic light, a computer program loading, as a prompt to pause for just 30 seconds. We call it the receptionist technique. Before you automatically react, you consciously stop. Pay attention to your breath and deliberately release physical tension in your shoulders, your jaw. This small break cuts through the constant acceleration loop.
That's brilliant, turning environmental noise into a cue for safety. What's next for restoring some agency?
Second, implement the values-aligned microaction, or the 10-minute recharge. When you feel that sense of being stuck or overwhelmed, set a timer for just 10 minutes. Engage in a low-pressure, value-aligned activity, something rooted in your humanity, not your productivity.
Like stretching or listening to music.
Exactly. Or writing a few thoughts in a journal. This interrupts the all-or-nothing thinking that plagues burnout and proves you have agency over your time.
And finally, what about clearing all that mental chatter that keeps the brain running hot at night?
Third, try the mental ledger clearance. Before bed, not when you're already in bed, take 5 minutes to write down everything that is running riot in your mind. Plans, worries, unresolved tasks, get it all onto the page. This small act of containment externalizes the noise and allows the mind to enter a rest state more easily.
That is a practical 3-step protocol that anyone can start with. It doesn't require a massive life change, just consistency. So here's the final provocative thought for you to carry forward, using the language of our deep dive. Treat the repeating negative emotional signals, irritation, chronic exhaustion, apathy, as a systems alert. If your body or your mood sends the same message 3 days in a row, treat it as a strategy that needs changing, not noise to ignore or power through. That signal is valuable data about a flawed design.
And remember that this kind of deep recovery, it looks quiet, maybe even boring from the outside. but it feels like genuine, sustainable control on the inside. If these patterns feel too intense to manage alone, please explore professional support. Modalities like ACT are specifically designed to help with this. You are not failing, you are redesigning.